Now, this is a man who goes by many names: Jianzhu, the Gravedigger, the Butcher of Zulu Pass, the Architect, the man who wrongfully identified the Avatar. He is one of my favorite characters from the Avatar extended universe. He served as the main antagonist in the first Kyoshi novel, and is truly a ruthless villain that Kyoshi has to contend with. Not only is he a master earthbender, he also has substantial political influence that spans the entire Earth Kingdom and parts of the rest of the world. On top of this, he's very intelligent, resourceful, and strategic, making him one of the deadliest antagonists in Avatar. In this video, I'll be going through the life of Jianzhu and explain why he's such a well-written and terrifying villain. And you're going to want to stay tuned to find out how he got his nickname, the Gravedigger. Let's start with Jianzhu's early life. So in his early life, he had an interest in politics and made some connections with people in Ba Sing Se as early as he could. Over time, he started to gain some political influence in the Earth Kingdom. When it comes to earthbending, he trained under Liu Beifong, who was of course part of the very prestigious Beifong family. Jianzhu first met Avatar Kuruk as he was learning earthbending in the Earth Kingdom. Kuruk was determined to incorporate waterbending forms into his earthbending, which wasn't necessarily approved by his master. Jianzhu, however, saw this as a great strength of Kuruk's, and eventually the two became very close friends, as Jianzhu continually trained him in earthbending. After a while, Kuruk grew tired of constantly battling dark spirits, and Jianzhu took on the political responsibilities of the Avatar, gaining even more political power. The companions of Kuruk eventually split up, making Jianzhu feel guilty for not teaching and guiding Kuruk through the various responsibilities of being the Avatar. Kuruk died at the young age of 33, which further added to the feelings of guilt that Jianzhu experienced. Jianzhu promised that he would search for and identify the next Avatar, which was set to be an Earthbender Avatar. So next we'll discuss how Jianzhu attempted to maintain a more active role in maintaining balance without the Avatar. Finding the next Avatar proved to be extremely difficult for Jianzhu and the rest of the Earth Kingdom sages. They searched the Earth Kingdom for quite some time with no results, so they started searching the rest of the world. In this time, Jianzhu took a more active role in maintaining balance in the absence of Kuruk, which took a toll on Jianzhu as more conflicts arose over time. This is where Jianzhu's malice and evil starts to grow. He made efforts to hunt down various Dao Fei groups, which are basically groups of gangs and criminals. In one instance, he hunted down a group called the Yellownecks and easily defeated them in a place called Zulu Pass. He decided not to execute their leader, but still tortured the earthbending rebels to death. He then told the non-benders that they would be free if they could dig a hole deep enough to hide in by sunset. If they couldn't, then Jianzhu would kill them. Once night fell, Jianzhu went back on his deal and used his bending to bury the 5,000 rebels who managed to dig holes, while the rest fled. This is extremely dark and is how he earned the name Jianzhu the Gravedigger. What's even worse is that Jianzhu was actually rewarded for taking down this criminal gang and considered a national hero, which gave him even more credibility and political power throughout the world. Of course, the public was unaware of this massacre that actually took place. So naturally over time, Jianzhu grew more desperate to find the Avatar. So in an effort to find them, Jianzhu and one of Kuruk's other companions, Kelsong, an airbender, decided to use traditional airbender methods to identify the Avatar. This is the method of children picking out specific toys, which we saw a little bit in Avatar: The Last Airbender with Aang. They tried this method several times. One place in particular was a remote town called Yokoyo. None of the children ended up passing the test. One child, who was an orphan, ended up selecting one correct toy, but then they just decided to run off with it. This child was actually Kyoshi. Jianzhu and Kelsong decided not to chase after her and just continue their search elsewhere. Over time, many sages and elders lost faith of finding the Avatar, believing that the cycle has ended. This put even more pressure on Jianzhu, attempting to identify the Avatar. Eventually, they ended up at another village where they met Young, an orphan boy who was hustling tourists for money in games of Pai Sho. Jianzhu quickly noticed that Young was using the exact strategies of Kuruk, which he never shared with anyone besides his companions. Jianzhu tested Young's earthbending and proved to be extremely skilled, so Jianzhu declared that Young was the next avatar. Of course, Jianzhu was overjoyed of finally identifying the avatar. So next he decided to construct a mansion in Yokoya to train Young as the next avatar. The mansion included a full staff of people to maintain it, and one of the servants happened to be Kyoshi. Kyoshi and Young ended up being great friends. Jianzhu put Young through extreme training while at the mansion, which isn't necessarily an evil thing to do, but he was pushing Young very hard at a relatively young age. Examples of this was learning to ingest and build resistance to poisons, which he learned from a master waterbender. While Young was very gifted at earthbending, he showed no such skill in the other elements. At one point, Jianzhu made Young do firebender training positions while standing on spikes made of earth. Jianzhu attributed Young's lack of bending to him not being disciplined, and again, Jianzhu was desperate to gain even more political power and ensure that he made the right decision, declaring Young as the avatar. Jianzhu started having doubts about Young, which was reinforced by seeing how strong Kyoshi was at bending while at a treaty signing with the Fifth Nation, who were a naval power that rejected the boundaries of the Four Nations. Jianzhu attempted to interrogate Kyoshi to see if she was secretly the avatar, but all Kyoshi said was that she panicked and didn't fully realize how powerful her bending was. So Jianzhu grew frustrated, and in an act of desperation, Jianzhu decided to take Young and Kyoshi to a remote mountain where a spirit could identify who was the real avatar. They contacted a spirit called Father Glowworm, which was actually a dark spirit that Kuruk knew and fought with in the past. Jianzhu slightly sedated Young and Kyoshi, and the spirit took blood from both of them and identified Kyoshi as the real avatar. The spirit wanted to consume more, so Jianzhu decided to save Kyoshi while Young was attacked and taken into the spirit world by Father Glowworm. This was an insane move by Jianzhu, as he was very close to Young, and this just shows that all he cared about right now was power and having control of the avatar. Young even looked up to Jianzhu and considered him a father figure, but Jianzhu showed no hesitation to sacrifice him, perhaps to try and cover the mistake of wrongfully identifying the avatar. After Young was gone, Kyoshi was completely outraged and attacked Jianzhu. This is where Kyoshi firebent for the first time, even though it was an accident. Kyoshi's attacks didn't affect Jianzhu too much, as he was a master earthbender and Kyoshi didn't have any training. Eventually, Kelsang showed up to the mountain after becoming suspicious that the group wasn't at the mansion. Jianzhu tried to persuade Kelsang that Kyoshi was the real avatar, but he admitted that Young was dead and attempted to deny responsibility for it. Kyoshi told Kelsang the truth, and Kelsang vowed that Jianzhu would no longer be involved with Kyoshi ever again. Jianzhu became enraged and attacked Kelsang and eventually killed him by bending a sliver of rock right through his neck. This was a huge turning point for Jianzhu, as he just killed a companion that he's known for years and years without any hesitation. Whenever someone threatens his power, Jianzhu always finds out a way to come out on top. Now, with Young gone and Jianzhu having to constantly make excuses for his absence, many politicians around the world started questioning his power and status as the Avatar's guardian. He did his best to rely on his allies and talk his way out of situations, but it wasn't working too well. Jianzhu then committed another insane act during a meeting with many high-ranking politicians at the Yokoya mansion. This group of people were trying to take the Avatar away from him. And of course, at this point, nobody knows that Kyoshi is the true Avatar. So Jianzhu decided to poison the water being used to make tea for everyone. The staff, the politicians, and even himself. Of course, Jianzhu knew that he needed to keep himself out of suspicion during the act, so he poisoned himself and counted on the training he got to resist poison from the same waterbending master for Young. This was a horrendous act and just shows how corrupt Jianzhu has become with power. He would risk his own life by poisoning himself just to take out a group of people that opposed him. Now, all Jianzhu could think about was hunting down Kyoshi and forcing her to obey him as her new guardian. Of course, Jianzhu could care less about Kyoshi. All he wanted to do was control her and gather even more power. So now, Jianzhu relied on his massive influence throughout the world to hunt down Kyoshi. At one point, Jianzhu even borrowed some shear shoes to track down Kyoshi and got some shear shoe spit darts for himself. None of the methods that he used ended up catching Kyoshi and her friends, so he ended up tracking them down himself and found them at Zygon Village, where he paralyzed Kyoshi and her friends. He decided to capture Ranji, Kyoshi's girlfriend, and left a note on where to find him. Jianzhu even cut off Ranji's hair and included it in the note as extra incentive for Kyoshi. Their final confrontation occurred at Qingqiao Village in a tea shop. Jianzhu threatened her to come with him and said that he would kill everyone in the tea shop if she refused. Kyoshi tried to kill him, but they ended up in an earthbending stalemate, trying to simultaneously collapse and hold up the tea shop. Out of nowhere, Young comes back from the dead and entered the tea shop in a newly possessed state. He was possessed by the Father Glowworm spirit and ended up killing Jianzhu by earthbending a piece of rock through his chest. Young mysteriously left and Kyoshi saved everyone in the tea shop. So, that pretty much concludes Jianzhu's life throughout the Kyoshi novel. His lust for power and control led him to massacre several groups of gangs, sacrifice Young, poison an entire group of politicians, and constantly hunt and threaten Kyoshi's life. Jianzhu was a firm believer in the Avatar's role in the world and wasn't willing to change this mindset. He blamed himself for the perceived failures of Avatar Kuruk and had immense feelings of guilt for many years. This disdain caused Jianzhu to become increasingly ruthless, brutal, and deadly, and directed those feelings toward his political rivals and gangs such as the Yellownecks. The evil acts were positively reinforced as he gained even more power and control over the world. Ultimately, he thought that his means justified the end, and lost all morality as he did whatever was necessary to maintain his political status. I think Jianzhu is such a good villain for this story, and I would love to see him in any sort of adaptation of his character in the future in a Kyoshi-focused animated project. So, that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think, and thanks so much for watching.